Good morning, everyone. My name is Akriti Agrawal, and this is my third video. And in the last class, we have discussed about the constitutional essence of the Indian society. That is, we were talking about the constitutional essence means the fundamental core principles of the constitution. That is, the basic structure of the constitution is the grand norm of the Indian society. And thereafter I have told you that the everything in the Indian society has to subscribe to the fundamental core principles of the constitution. So then I have told you that the Indian society covers many things, that is the laws enacted by the parliament and the state legislatures, the people of India political sovereign, then, thirdly, the constitutional authorities like president, vice president, so on and so forth. And fourthly, the three organs of the government, that is the judiciary, executive, and legislature. Okay, then we were talking about the first part of the Indian society, that is the laws. The laws enacted by the parliament. Okay, laws enacted by the parliament. So then I have told you that whenever the Indian parliament enacts a law, it is the duty of the parliament to make the law in consonance with the fundamental core principles of the constitution. That is to make the law in line with the constitution. Okay, then only it will be said to be constitutionally valid and can be applicable on the Indian people. Otherwise, it cannot be applicable in the Indian society if it is devoid of the essential basic structure of the doctrine, essential principles of the constitution. Okay, so that we have discussed in our last class. Then I have told you that the Article 13, we were talking about Article 13. Okay, and in Article 13, I'm so sorry. Clause 1, it talks about the pre-constitutional laws, and clause 2, it talks about the post-constitutional laws. So today, so we have started talking about the post-constitutional laws, right? Post constitutional laws. So then I have told you that whenever any law is being enacted after the commencement of the Indian Constitution, it can be challenged before the court of law, and then the court will examine its constitutional validity. And if after examining its constitutional validity, if the court finds that it is devoid of the fundamental core principles of the constitution, that is, it is violative, abridging the fundamental rights of the people of India, of the citizens of India, then Article 13, Clause 2 gives the power to the Honorable Supreme Court to do away with that law, to declare that law as constitutionally invalid, to declare that law as void ab initio. Void ab initio and unconstitutional. And unconstitutional. Okay, so declare that law to be void ab initio and unconstitutional. Then I have told you about the meaning of void ab initio. It means that the law will be considered as if it never has taken place. In the eyes of law, it will be non-existing. It will be non-existing. Okay, in the eyes of law. Law will not consider that this law has ever been taken place. Okay. So this will be the meaning. So now in order to make it more clear, we will be taking the example. Acha, but before that, I have ended my last class, on the point that when the question of the constitutional validity of the particular law is before the Honorable Supreme Court, the Honorable Supreme Court will examine it, and either the Honorable Supreme Court will find it to be constitutionally valid, it will declare it to be constitutionally valid and in consonance with the Indian Constitution. No problem, it will be applicable in India, right? But if the Honorable Supreme Court finds it to be unconstitutional, to be violative of the fundamental rights of the people of India, then the Supreme Court has two options. Either to right away declare the law to be void ab initio and unconstitutional, and the consequence will be it will be wiped off from the society. It will not be applicable on the Indian people. Second point is, the second option is not to declare the law to be unconstitutional, rather to modify, to interpret. You tell me that what is the function of the judiciary? The function of the judiciary is to interpret the laws enacted by the parliament, enacted by the legislature, right? So the Supreme Court interprets the law. And how the Supreme Court interprets the law? Either to give it literal interpretation or to give it the liberal interpretation. That is the purposive interpretation. So, rules of interpretation we will be doing later on. Okay. So, when the court finds that there is some mischief in the particular law and it has to be cured, and it is not in line with the constitution, then instead of declaring the law to be unconstitutional, what the court can do is, court can interpret the law liberally. Court can give the law liberal interpretation. That is, or we can say the purposive interpretation, right? The liberal interpretation. Purposive interpretation, right? Purposive interpretation. So this liberal interpretation can be said to be wide interpretation, giving wide interpretation, modifying the law in such a way so as to make it in consonance with the fundamental core principles of the constitution, so as to inculcate the essence of the constitution in the particular law of which it was devoid, and that is why it was challenged before the court of law. तो जो भी उसमें कमियां हैं उसको हम निकाल के उसको कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन के लाइन में लेके आए, और वो हम कैसे कर सकते हैं? बाय गिविंग द लिबरल एंड पर्पसिव इंटरप्रिटेशन टू द पर्टिकुलर लॉ. Okay, so it is like this, right? Now we have to understand that how the Supreme Court gives the liberal interpretation. So this it means that okay, I will make you this understand with the help of example. Okay, but before this, okay, so let's take the example of this only. Right. So there is a law which is a post-constitutional law, that is the, let me erase this first. Muslim women protection of rights on Divorce Act 1986. Okay, Muslim Women Protection of Rights on Divorce Act 1986. Right. So, I will be telling you about this in brief, okay, because it is the part of Muslim law. Okay, so what happened was after the commencement of the Indian Constitution, the upon Muslims, the Muslim personal law was applicable, and as per the Muslim personal law, after the divorce of the Muslim woman, after the divorce of the Muslim woman, she was only entitled to get the maintenance from their former husbands up to the period of iddat, up to the iddat period. That is the 3 months or 4 months, 10 days, as the case may be. Okay, so only till that time the divorced Muslim woman can claim maintenance from her former husband, and after that, the former husband has no duty to maintain the divorced wife, to maintain his divorced wife. Okay, so this was the criteria, but what happened was there was a case. There was a case there was a case Shah Banu Begum judgment. Okay, there was a case Shah Banu Begum judgment in which the question was that the Muslim women should also be entitled to claim maintenance even after the period, because we have the secular law, that is the CRPC. है ना, we have at that time we had the CRPC section 125 of the CRPC. So as per that law, the Muslim women also should have the right to claim maintenance from their former husbands till the time they marry or till their whole life. Okay, so it should be like this, but they were not getting that maintenance. So in that particular judgment, in the Shah Banu Begum judgment, the Honorable Supreme Court held that the Muslim women will also be entitled to maintenance till their whole life, not up to the iddat period, but till their whole life, till they remarry. Okay, so that they can also be provided justice, है ना? It is required to make equality, to give equality to all the women in the Indian society, irrespective of their religion, है ना? So they are also entitled to get the benefit of secular law, correct? So it was like this. Then now there was huge uproar that now Muslim husband are liable to maintain their divorced wife till their whole life. So that is why this law was enacted. This act was enacted, Muslim Women Protection. This act was enacted, and in this act, it was mentioned under Section 3 of this act, of the 1986 Act, that the former husbands are liable to maintain their divorced wife uh, up to their iddat period. So I am telling you it in brief. It is a huge topic. Okay, so up to the iddat period, they are only liable to maintain their wives, their divorced wives. You see, this the always I have told you that the purpose of the parliament in enacting the law is to serve the ends of justice of the persons. So the in the objects and reasons of this particular law, it was mentioned that the law was enacted in order to protect the interest of the Muslim women, in order to protect the interest of the Muslim women. But actually, it was not doing so. It was limiting the providing of the maintenance to the Muslim women up to the that period only. है ना, making them run from pillar to post in search of their in search of any person to maintain them, है ना. So this was the situation because this law was throwing the Muslim women into the situation of destitution and vagrancy, right? So now this law was applicable. Now in 2001, in the case of Daniel Latifi, in the case of Daniel Latifi versus Union of India, 2001 Supreme Court, correct? So in this case, this I have told you that one of the person from within India itself, as a petitioner, he will be challenging any of the law, है ना. So in this case, the petitioner challenged this law to be unconstitutional on the ground that it is violating the fundamental rights of the Muslim women, and it is taking away the abridging the fundamental rights. It is serving inequality to the Muslim women. So it should be declared as unconstitutional and void, right? Then the petitioner approached the Supreme Court. Then what happened was the Honorable Supreme Court examined its validity, constitutional validity, and found that yes, actually under Section 3 Clause 1 of the Act 1986, it is limiting the liability of the husbands to maintain their divorced wife up to the death period. Then what will they do after the death period? Till their whole life, where they will go in order to claim maintenance, right? So now the court found that yes, it is not in consonance with the fundamental core principles of the Constitution. The Act lacks the fundamental principles like justice, equality. Instead of providing equality to Muslim women, it is serving inequality to Muslim women. Okay, so what happened? The Supreme Court, instead of declaring the law to be unconstitutional, Supreme Court did not declare this act to be unconstitutional. Rather, the Supreme Court held that this act is very well constitutionally valid. It is constitutionally valid act, but what the court did was the court gave the liberal interpretation. The court gave the liberal interpretation and the purposive interpretation to the act, to that particular provision, or we can say the whole act. Okay, what the court did, court modified, है ना. जब भी लॉज में कुछ भी इनकॉन्सोनेंस होता है, मतलब इनकंसिस्टेंसी होती है कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन के अगेंस्ट, तो वो लिबरल या फिर पर्पसिव इंटरप्रिटेशन देते हैं. और इसमें सुप्रीम कोर्ट क्या करते हैं कि वो मॉडिफाई करते हैं, प्रोविजंस को मॉडिफाई करते हैं और उसको ऐसे चेंज करते हैं जिससे वो कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन की लाइन में आ जाए, है ना. तो द कोर्ट गिव द लिबरल इंटरप्रिटेशन एंड मॉडिफाइड द प्रोविजन of that law and make it in line with the Constitution. And then in the provision, the words were changed to that the Muslim husband will be liable to maintain their divorced wife till their whole life. They have to make, and I cannot recall those exact words in the law, but the crux was that the Muslim husband will be liable to maintain their divorced wife till their whole life or till they remarry. Okay, so now now the law was in consonance with the Indian Constitution. Now there is no problem. It is not devoid of the fundamental core principles of the Constitution, right? So this is how the court liberally interpreted the this act, है ना. अभी आपको समझ में आ रहा है? अच्छा, whenever the Supreme Court interprets the law, it is the duty of the court also to what should I say, to give way to the intention of the legislature. The Supreme Court has to take care of the intention of the legislature behind enacting that law. मैंने आपको बताया था कि हमेशा जब भी पार्लियामेंट कोई लॉ बनाएगा उनके पीछे कोई ना कोई पर्टिकुलर इंटेंशन होगा जिसको वो सर्व करना चाहते हैं. तो हमेशा सुप्रीम कोर्ट जब भी इंटरप्रेट करेगा किसी लॉ को तो वो ये ध्यान रखेगा सुप्रीम कोर्ट कि जो पार्लियामेंट का पर्पस है, इंटेंशन है, उसको हम अचीव कर पाए, है ना. दिस इज हाउ द सुप्रीम कोर्ट इंटरप्रेट्स द लॉ so that the intention, the purpose of the legislature behind enacting that law can be purposively achieved. That is what is called the purposive interpretation. है ना, to achieve the purpose of the legislature, giving the purposive interpretation to the enactment, okay, to the law, right? तो this is how it is. तो अब आपको ये समझ में आया. मैंने आपको दो तरीके बताए, या तो सुप्रीम कोर्ट कॉन्स्टिट्यूशनली वॉइड डिक्लेयर कर देगा, है ना, अनकॉन्स्टिट्यूशनल डिक्लेयर कर देगा, या फिर कॉन्स्टिट्यूशनली वैलिड डिक्लेयर करेगा बट उसमें मॉडिफिकेशन कर देगा, है ना. आफ्टर दिस मॉडिफिकेशन, आफ्टर दिस लिबरल इंटरप्रिटेशन, नाउ इट इज कॉन्स्टिट्यूशनली वैलिड, है ना. नाउ द डिफेक्ट हैज बीन क्योर्ड. वही तो डिफेक्ट था ना, इनइक्वालिटी प्रोवाइड कर रहा था मुस्लिम वुमेन को, अब वो डिफेक्ट क्योर हो गया तो अब कोई प्रॉब्लम नहीं है, इट इज वेरी वेल वैलिड. ओके, I want to tell you one thing, that why in some situations, and I should say in 99% cases, the Supreme Court will try to make the law, to declare the particular law which is being constitutionally challenged to be constitutionally valid. Court will always try to declare a law to be constitutionally valid, despite the fact that the law is not in consonance with the Indian Constitution. Still, the court will try to declare this law, to declare a particular law to be constitutionally valid, है ना, and by giving it the liberal and purposive interpretation. Why? क्यों हमेशा कोर्ट ये ट्राई करता है? कोर्ट आउटराइटली या फिर राइट अवे उसको अनकॉन्स्टिट्यूशनल डिक्लेयर नहीं करता, बट ये ट्राई करता है कि हम उसमें कुछ मॉडिफिकेशन करके उसका लॉ में जो प्रोविजन है उनका डिफेक्ट को क्योर करें. क्यों? Because you know that whenever the parliament enacts a law, there is a long process, है ना. Firstly, the law will be tabled before any house of the parliament, and then it will come into floor. There will be huge discussions, and there will be steps that I cannot recall right now, but there are steps, and from those steps the law has to pass, right? So it takes long discussions. There are several debates, and the law has to send to the selecting committee, joint parliamentary committee, and many more, so that it can be checked that whether such law should be enacted or not, or whether there is requirement for any amendment in that law or not, है ना. तो वो पूरा एक प्रोसेस होता है और बहुत लंबा डिस्कशन, डिबेट्स चलती हैं, बहुत लंबे टाइम तक लॉ को एग्जामिन किया जाता है कि वो सच्ची में लॉ बनना चाहिए या नहीं, है ना. तो that precious time which the members of parliament they have given in enacting that law, the Supreme Court respects that time. The Supreme Court respects the parliament, the members of the parliament. They have given their precious time, and that is why the Supreme Court does not want to declare that law to be unconstitutional. If it is possible to cure the defect from the law, to make it in line with the constitution, then why to declare the law to be unconstitutional? है ना. उन्होंने इतने मेहनत से लॉ बनाया है, तो अगर उसमें से मिसचीफ हटा सकते हैं, रिमूव कर सकते हैं, तो हम पूरा लॉ को अनकॉन्स्टिट्यूशनल डिक्लेयर क्यों करेंगे? तो दैट इज व्हाई द सुप्रीम कोर्ट मोस्टली ट्राई टू डिक्लेयर द लॉ, not to declare the law to be unconstitutional, rather to do away with the mischief from the law and make it in make it in line with the Indian, making it in line with the Indian Constitution, है ना, essential core principles of the Constitution, है ना, making it in line with the basic structure of the Constitution, correct? तो it is like this, है ना। तो मैंने आपको दो ऑप्शंस बताए थे, या तो ये वो कॉन्स्टिट्यूशनली आउटराइटली डिक्लेयर करेंगे या फिर नहीं करेंगे। नाउ सेकंड, तो अब आई होप यू हैव गॉट दिस, यू आर एबल टू रिलेट इट विद दैट। ओके, तो नाउ आई विल बी टेलिंग यू द सेकंड थिंग। Now I will be telling you the second thing. ठीक है, wherein the Honorable Supreme Court declare the law to be unconstitutional and void ab initio. From its very beginning, it is non-existing in the eyes of law, right? In the after, acha, let's write it. National Judicial National Judicial National Judicial Appointments Commission. I hope you are able to read this. National Judicial Appointments Commission. That is NJAC, right? NJAC. So this act was enacted by the Indian Parliament by the 99th Constitutional Amendment 2014, right? 99th Constitutional Amendment 2014, right? So now this also I will be telling you in brief in order to make you understand that when the Supreme Court decides to declare the law to be unconstitutional and not to give liberal and purposive interpretation to the particular law. ठीक है, तो we know that after the commencement of the Indian Constitution, the exclusive power, the primacy over the appointments of the judicial officers, the judges, was vested with the executive, vested with the president, and thereby indirectly the prime minister, है ना। तो thereafter when the Supreme Court, there was a huge tussle, long going tussle between the government, executive and legislature on the one part and the judiciary on the other part, right, with regard to the appointments of the judges. So thereafter, in 1985 and in 1991, there were several judgments of the Supreme Court wherein the Honorable Supreme Court held that the primacy of appointing the judges should not be vested in the hands of the executive. Rather, it should be in the hands of the judiciary, the judges, so that we can protect the independence of judiciary, right? We can protect the independence of judiciary. And in 1973 we already have the basic structure doctrine, which was being evolved by the Kesav Nanda Bharti judgment, watershed judgment. So the independence of judiciary, है ना, independence of judiciary. Okay, independence of judiciary. So we know this is one of the principle of basic structure doctrine. This is one of the principle of basic structure doctrine, independence of judiciary, right? So, we know that there were many principles which were being incorporated in the basic structure doctrine, and in the case of Nanda Bharati case, it was held by the Honorable Supreme Court that the Parliament can amend any part of the Indian Constitution, can amend any part of the Indian Constitution, be it the fundamental part, be it the governance part, by way of Article 368 of the Indian Constitution. No problem. But the Indian Parliament cannot touch the principles which are being incorporated in the basic structure doctrine, which are the principles they are there, which are the basic structure principles that cannot be amended by the Indian Parliament. So that was held, and this independence of judiciary is a part of the basic structure doctrine. Independence of judiciary means what? That suppose you tell me that if the primacy over the appointment of judges is in the hands of the executive, that is the government, then it will not lead to independence of judiciary, है ना? The judiciary will become subordinate to the executive, है ना? If there is any case before the Honorable Supreme Court in which the government is one of the party, then just because those judges who are the Supreme Court judges, they were being appointed by the government, exclusively by the government. They will be influenced, है ना? Because then they will be biased in favor of the government, that we have been appointed by the government, so we have to decide the case in favor of the government, है ना? So this will not lead to independence of judiciary, राइट? जुडिशरी इंडिपेंडेंट रह ही नहीं पाएगी, जुडिशरी में इसका इंटरवेंशन आ जाएगा, इंटरफेरेंस आ जाएगा गवर्नमेंट का, एंड दैट जजेस डिड नॉट वांट, है ना? बिकॉज वी हैव सीन द कॉन्सिक्वेंसेस ऑफ दिस involvement of the government in the judiciary, the appointment of the judges by the government, that its consequence we have seen in the case of Nanda Bharati case, because of the supersession of judges. There were two situations when there were supersession of judges. ओके तो दो बार ऐसा हुआ था ना, सुपरसेशन ऑफ जजेस हुए थे दो बार, तो वो इस चीज को हटाने के लिए कि हम जजेस हैं तो हम डिसाइड करेंगे कि वहां पे कौन आना चाहिए कौन नहीं आना चाहिए अपॉइंटमेंट, अगर एग्जीक्यूटिव अपॉइंट करेगा, गवर्नमेंट अपॉइंट करेगा जजेस को, तो वो इन्फ्लुएंस होंगे, वो फिर ये सोचेंगे कि हमें गवर्नमेंट ने अपॉइंट किया तो हमें गवर्नमेंट के फेवर में केस देना है, तो जस्टिस कहाँ हो पाएगा, इक्वालिटी कहाँ हो पाएगी, है ना? इट इज अगेंस्ट द इंडियन कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन. तो दैट इज वाई in several cases in the Supreme Court advocates on record association versus Union of India, the Honorable Supreme Court held that the primacy over the appointment of judges will be in the hands of the judiciary and not the executive. The judiciary will be having that primacy, and thereafter in the re-presidential reference case in 1999, the Honorable Supreme Court came up with the collegium system, with the concept of with the concept of collegium system, wherein there will be a criteria wherein the Honorable Chief Justice of India and other Supreme Court judges will be appointing the judges of the Supreme Court, the judges of the High Court, the Chief Justices of the High Courts, and the transfer of judges from one court to High Court. Okay, so this was the collegium system. So I am telling you this in brief. Okay. Now, after this collegium system, the power to appoint the judges was in the hands of the judiciary. है ना? The ultimate decision, the appointment will be by the president. But now they have the vast power as compared to before. अब जजेस के पास वास्ट पावर है. पहले तो बस ये था कि उनकी एडवाइस लेनी थी प्रेसिडेंट को जजेस की. अब उन्होंने एडवाइस करी, उसके बाद जज प्रेसिडेंट डिसाइड करेंगे कि वो उस एडवाइस को मानते हैं या नहीं है ना. अल्टीमेट डिसीजन प्रेसिडेंट का होता था. बट कोलिजियम सिस्टम आने के बाद ये हुआ कि अब सिर्फ एडवाइस नहीं लेनी है उनसे, उनका जो भी रिकमेंडेशन होगा उसको बहुत ध्यान में रखते हुए प्रेसिडेंट को अपॉइंट करना है. और बहुत हद तक ये ट्राई करना है कि जो भी जजेस ने रिकमेंडेशन दी है वही हो, वही जजेस अपॉइंट हो. अगर प्रेसिडेंट उससे कुछ चेंज भी चाह रहा है या फिर रिकंसिडर करने के लिए कहना चाहता है तो वो कह सकते हैं सुप्रीम कोर्ट को. बट अब कोलिजियम सिस्टम के बाद जुडिशरी के पास एक्सक्लूसिव पावर्स आ गई, ज्यादा पावर्स आ गई पहले से. ओके. अब नाउ what happened now, the power of appointing the judges was in the hands of the collegium system, है ना, the judges of the Supreme Court. Now what happened was in 2014, the parliament, they came up with the National Judicial Appointments Commission, wherein they tried to nullify this collegium system. They tried to nullify the judgment of the re-presidential reference case, है ना, to do away with this collegium system. And they come up with the commission that wherein the executive will also be involved, and the executive and they will be the Supreme Court will be having the say, but more say will be of the executive, है ना. So it was like this. So then they came with the Judicial Appointment Commission. And now this act, this amendment was again challenged before the Supreme Court in 2015 in the case of I hope you are getting it till now. In the case of Supreme Court advocates on record association versus Union of India 2015 Supreme Court. 2015 Supreme Court. So in this case, the constitutional validity of NJAC was challenged on the ground that it is violative of the basic structure doctrine of the Constitution. Why? Because the basic structure doctrine of the Constitution covers the independence of judiciary as one of the principles, and independence of judiciary means the judges will be appointing, the judiciary will be appointing the judges, and there will be no interference of the executive in the appointment of the judges. But this NJAC was against this principle, was against this basic independence of judiciary. Okay, so in case of Nanda Bharti case, the Honorable Supreme Court has already made it clear that you can amend any part of the Indian Constitution, but you cannot amend the basic structure doctrine. You cannot amend the principles entrusted in the basic structure doctrine, right? But this NJAC was violating this basic structure doctrine. So on that ground, the act was challenged, the amendment was challenged, before the Supreme Court in this case, correct? Then in that, अब now the court examined the constitutional validity. अब हम उसी चीज पे आ गए ना. Court has examined the constitutional validity and court found that yes, it is not in line with the Indian constitution. It is violating the basic structure of the constitution, which we cannot allow, which we cannot allow. So then, instead of giving it liberal or purposive interpretation, what the Supreme Court did was the Supreme Court declared the NJAC to be void and unconstitutional. ठीक है, declared the NJAC to be void ab initio. I should write void ab initio. Void ab initio and unconstitutional. Okay, void ab initio and unconstitutional, which means that the day on which it was enacted, from that day itself, it is non-est in the eyes of law, as if it has never existed in the eyes of law. करेक्ट. तो नाउ द सुप्रीम कोर्ट डिक्लेयर्ड इट अनकॉन्स्टिट्यूशनल. उन्होंने कुछ ट्राई नहीं किया कि इसमें हम कुछ क्योर कर पाए, बिकॉज यहाँ पे सुप्रीम कोर्ट ने ये देखा कि एनजेसी तो पूरा प्रोविजन, पूरा एक्ट ही डिवॉइड ऑफ कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन है. इसमें ऐसा नहीं है कि हम इसमें कुछ डिफेक्ट हो तो उसे क्योर करके उसको इन लाइन विद कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन बना सके, ऐसा हो ही नहीं सकता. तो इसीलिए उन्होंने यहाँ ये चूज किया कि इसको हम अनकॉन्स्टिट्यूशनल डिक्लेयर कर देते हैं. करेक्ट, अनकॉन्स्टिट्यूशनल डिक्लेयर कर दिया. तो ये मैंने आपको एनजेएसी और 1986 एक्ट, मुस्लिम विमेन 1986 एक्ट, इन दोनों का एग्जाम्पल इसीलिए दिया क्योंकि ये दोनों पोस्ट कॉन्स्टिट्यूशनल लॉज हैं. राइट, दे बोथ आर पोस्ट कॉन्स्टिट्यूशनल लॉज. वी वर टॉकिंग अबाउट आर्टिकल 13 क्लॉज 2 post constitutional laws, and in one act the honorable Supreme Court right away declared it unconstitutional and void ab initio, and in other, that is 1986 act, the honorable Supreme Court gave it liberal and purposive interpretation, cured its defect and made it in line with the constitution, and thus declared the law to be constitutionally valid. Correct? तो इट इज लाइक दिस. राइट, तो अब हमारा इसमें हमने पोस्ट कॉन्स्टिट्यूशनल लॉज कंप्लीट कर लिया. वो आपको समझ में आ गया कि अब ये कॉन्स्टिट्यूशनल एसेंस से ही तो कनेक्टेड है. मैं आपको वही तो बता रही हूँ. अब कॉन्स्टिट्यूशनल एसेंस उनको एनजेसी में बिल्कुल दिखाई नहीं दिया, तो उन्होंने इसको हटा दिया, बिल्कुल अनकॉन्स्टिट्यूशनल डिक्लेयर कर दिया और उसको उसमें कॉन्स्टिट्यूशनल एसेंस ऐड कर दिया. कॉन्स्टिट्यूशनल एसेंस मीन्स फंडामेंटल कोर प्रिंसिपल्स को इनकलकेट किया 1986 एक्ट में, उसको मुस्लिम विमेन के लिए जस्टिस ओरिएंटेड बनाया, है ना, इक्वालिटी दी मुस्लिम विमेन को. और 1986 एक्ट में ये भी कह दिया कि मुस्लिम विमेन इंडिया का पार्ट है, तो इर्रेस्पेक्टिव ऑफ रिलीजन दे विल आल्सो बी एंटाइटल्ड टू टेक बेनिफिट ऑफ सेक्शन 125 of the CRPC. So that it is not, I am telling you this in brief only. Okay, now we will be starting with the pre-constitutional laws. Right, pre-constitutional laws. Article 13 clause 1, pre-constitutional laws. I hope you have got about the post-constitutional laws. Till now, I have told you whatever. You have got that, I hope. Okay? So now it is pre-constitutional laws. Okay, so I think now I should wind up and we will be resuming tomorrow. And thank you. Till then, take care.